Hi everyone, I'm Cindy Stocks and I'm the Director of Student Fellowships and Research at Bowdoin College. And welcome to your own private Truman Scholarship info session. My hope is to make this as easy and convenient for you as possible to get an overview of the Truman Scholarship and to be able to decide whether it's something that you'd like to find out more about. So in the next few moments, what we're going to do is talk about the mission of the Truman Scholarship, what the eligibility requirements are, what the benefits of receiving the scholarship are. We'll talk about the application process as well as what the application entails. And then hopefully that will sound interesting to you. And then we'll follow up with what the next steps should be in order to move forward in the process. So let's start by talking about what the mission is of the Truman Scholarship. So it's designed to kind of recognize college juniors of exceptional leadership potential who are interested in pursuing careers in service, and then giving those individuals the financial support, training, and network in order to really capitalize on that interest that they have in being a change agent and making a difference when it comes to a career in service. So if that's the mission, who's eligible? So you have to be a full-time college junior, you have to be a U.S. citizen, and you have to get nominated by your institution. So you have to get nominated by Bowdoin College. We'll talk about that process in a few minutes. In addition, if you go to the Truman website, you'll see that it states that you need to be in the top quarter of your class. That's an ideal situation. It is not an absolute criteria. If you have a strong leadership profile, a strong desire to have a career in service, then even if you think you might not be in the top quarter of your class, you should come and talk to me and we can kind of figure it out from there. So in addition to those kind of black and white criteria, some of the softer criteria are that you should have a strong record of leadership, a strong record in terms of public service, and a strong desire to have a career in a service field. So let's move on and talk about what are the benefits. If you actually receive a Truman Scholarship, what does that mean? Well, what it means is you get $30,000 towards graduate school, and that's a lot, and that's just the beginning. You also get to participate in the Truman Leadership Week. That happens right at the very end of your junior year. You also get the opportunity to participate in the Summer Institute. That happens after you graduate from Bowdoin, and it's a 10-week internship of your dreams paid in Washington, D.C. in a government or federal agency. And if you want to, the Summer Institute is optional, and another optional benefit is the Truman Fellows Program, which is a year-long program the year after you graduate where you're placed with a federal agency in Washington, D.C. Again, you're paid, and there's a mentoring opportunity, there's professional development, all organized through the Truman Scholarship Program. So, and for the record, I should also note that there is a service requirement. This typically isn't an issue because if you're somebody who's thinking about applying for a Truman, you're pretty sure you want to pursue a career in service. But the details are that you need to, you are required to work in a public service for 3 out of the 7 years after you have completed your graduate degree that's been funded with the Truman dollars. So let's move on and let's talk about the application process itself. So any Bowdoin student who is interested in applying needs to submit an application to Student Fellowships and Research by mid-November. To find out the exact dates, you can go to our website, which is www.bowdoin.edu/student-fellowships. Those applications will be reviewed by a committee of people that I work with, the Campus Truman Committee. From those applications, they'll pick a subset to invite in for an interview. Those interviews usually happen in early December. And then based on how those interviews go, the committee will select up to 4 people who will be finalists, and those finalists will go on and compete at the national level. Now, to give you some sense, we usually have, I don't know, maybe between 10 and 18 people who are Bowdoin students who are interested in applying. The committee usually invites 6 to 8 people in for an interview, and then, as I said, can select up to 4 people to go forward and compete at the national level. If you're one of those 4 people, you'll have the opportunity to continue to hone and refine your application. You'll work with me, you'll work with somebody on the committee, and you'll submit your final application to Truman at the end of January. Again, the exact date you can find on our website. Once your application has been submitted to Truman, it will be reviewed again by their selection committee, and they will pick a subset of individuals to be reviewed at various regions around the world. Those interviews happen throughout March at different times depending on the region, and the final decisions are announced usually in early April. So let's talk next about the application. What exactly does the application entail? The beginning is pretty easy. You just are listing name, address, major, number of credits, that type of thing. And then there are a number of lists that you have to complete. They want to know the schools that you've attended, high schools and colleges. They want to know what activities you've been involved with. They want to know about your public service, what kind of volunteer opportunities have you been involved with, as well as what kind of government activities. Perhaps you've done a get out the vote effort or worked for a candidate. Those types of activities would be listed there. They also want to know about any work experience that you've had. And lastly, about any awards, scholarship, publications, or any ways in which you've been recognized. So those are all kind of lists. Those 2 are pretty easy. Then we get into the real meat of the application, which is a series of essays. The first essay is about your leadership ability. I'm going to take a little bit of time to drill down on this one because this is really one of the most important essays when it comes to the Truman application. They're going to ask you to write about a time when, a very specific time, when you have demonstrated your leadership abilities. And when they talk about leadership, they have a very specific definition in mind. They are looking for an example of when, without being assigned and without anybody else pointing it out to you, you saw a problem, you saw a need, you saw a gap, and you came up with an idea about how this problem or this need could be addressed. And then you worked to kind of get others on board with your plan for how this problem could be addressed, and then implemented that plan. Now, over the years, our applicants have had a variety of answers to this. Some very dramatic examples of leadership from, starting nonprofits. And it doesn't need to be that dramatic. We've also had people who have talked about being on a summer internship and seeing a need, seeing a problem, and going to their boss and saying, here's an idea I have, and running with it. So this is often a tough one, and if you're not really sure whether or not your leadership example measures up, you can come in and talk to me and we'll figure it out together. But it is critically important, and they do want a really specific example, a really specific point in time. Another way to put it is name something or tell a story about something that your predecessor did not do and your successor will not do, something that is unique to what you have contributed. So that's the leadership essay. The next essay is to talk about a particularly satisfying public service experience that you've had. This is a short paragraph that you get to write about a time, hopefully different than your leadership example, when you've been engaged in service. The next essay is about the problem or need that you want to dedicate your life to, or when you go into public service, what it is that you want to focus on. There also is an essay then about your 3 most significant courses. This is probably the least important part of it. It's very short, very quick. And then they want you to write about what your graduate school plan is. So you have said, this is the area of service that I want to go into. And then they want you to write about what is a graduate program that's going to make the most sense given what your area of interest is. And they're hoping that you can be pretty specific. So for example, if you decide that you want to get a master's in public policy, they're really hoping that you can say what school you want to go to and why that particular school makes sense for you. So it could be its location, in that it's near a population that you want to work with. It could be that it has a focus on a global service, and that is of interest to you. It's up to you to do the research and then to make the case about why that particular program is of interest to you. Nobody's going to hold this to you. They want to see that though that you've done your research. And this is also the place where it makes sense what your GPA is. Remember at the beginning I said that they hoped that your GPA would be in the top quarter of your class, but if it wasn't a deal breaker. They want to see that you've been thoughtful. If you have perhaps a less than stellar GPA and you said that you wanted to go to grad school at Harvard, that might come across to them as if you weren't being very realistic and that you hadn't done your homework. So it's important that you think through what's reasonable and feasible for you in terms of a graduate school plan. Then they ask you to write about, once you've finished your graduate plan, what position, what is it that you see yourself doing? And then another essay about 5 to 7 years after that, what do you see yourself doing? So they're really asking you to kind of depict what you see your trajectory being. Grad school, what do you see yourself doing after grad school? And what do you see yourself doing 5 to 7 years after that? And then the essays wrap up with, what else do you want them to know? This is kind of a freebie. So if there's some aspect to you that you haven't had a chance to tell them because of you're trying to fit your life into these little boxes, this is where you can share that piece of information. And then the very last piece of the essay is the policy statement. And this is where they want to see whether or not you're able to kind of think like a policymaker, because that's what this is really about. So they ask you very briefly to write a statement of a problem, and then to propose some sort of policy fix for this problem, and then very briefly to outline the obstacles for implementing this policy that you've proposed. You don't really have to say how you would overcome those obstacles, you just have to acknowledge them. So those are the pieces of the application. Now, in the very best applications, all those pieces fit together to make a cohesive whole. So for example, you might have a leadership example that talks about your work on campus regarding climate change, and your public service essay might be about you're working for a environmental, not consulting, but for, say, the League of Conservation Voters over the summer. And then the issue that you would want to be involved with should probably be related to the environment. But if you had a leadership essay about the environment and your public service was about volunteering at Midcoast Hospital, and the issue that you wanted to work on was, say, mass incarceration, that wouldn't be the strongest application. You want to really think how you can how all the pieces will fit together. What's the theme that unites them? So we've talked about the whole application process, how applying through Bowdoin, hopefully getting an interview, hopefully being selected as one of the final 4. We've talked about what the application process actually entails. And so I'm hoping that gives you kind of a general sense of what the Truman Scholarship is about. Hopefully that gives you a sense about whether or not this is a fit for you and something that you might want to pursue. If this sounds like something that could be of interest to you and could be a fit, I encourage you to come in and meet with me. The best way to make that happen is to go to our website. Again, that's www.bowdoin.edu, student-fellowships, and there's a Book Now button there. Click on that, and from there it comes pretty intuitive. Just indicate that you want to meet with me, and it will show you all the times that I have available to meet with students, and you can pick one that works with your schedule. And if you are, in order to start an application, you should contact Corey Caldwell, my colleague. Corey isccaldwell@bowdoin.edu. He will start, kind of log you into the Truman application system. You'll get an email alerting you that an application has been created for you with a link on how to access it. It doesn't commit you to anything, so if you're even considering it, feel free to contact Corey and get that ball in motion. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope it's been helpful. And again, if you are curious, want to know more, I encourage you to come in and meet with me and we'll talk. So thanks very much. Bye-bye.